The crooked wheel on the stagecoach wasn't the only thing broken when Clara Bennett arrived in Copper Gulch, Wyoming Territory, in the summer of 1875. Her spirit had fractured long before the axle did, splintered by whispers that followed her every uneven step since childhood. Clara gripped her modest carpetbag and descended awkwardly from the coach, her left leg dragging slightly as it always had. The small mining town stretched before her, one dusty main street lined with false-fronted buildings, the promise of a new beginning hovering like the heat waves above the distant mountains. "Miss, you need help with that." The driver's voice carried a note of impatience as he hefted trunks from the coach roof. "No, thank you, I can manage." Clara straightened her spine, determined not to show weakness on her first day. Her parents had arranged everything: a position as a schoolteacher in this remote place where nobody knew her history, her failings, her shame. A place to disappear. The Wyoming sun beat down mercilessly as Clara made her way toward the boarding house at the end of the street. Each step was a reminder of her difference: the slight drag of her left foot, the uneven rhythm that had marked her as an object of pity or scorn back in Boston. The accident during her childhood had left her with what the doctors called a permanent impediment, but what society called a reason for rejection. The mercantile's bell tinkled as the door swung open, and a tall man in a worn leather vest stepped onto the boardwalk, stopping short when he noticed her. Clara kept her eyes forward, pretending not to see the flash of curiosity on his face. She'd seen that look 1,000 times before. "New arrival?" His voice was deep, with the faintest trace of a drawl. Clara nodded curtly, not slowing her pace. "Just passing through." It was a lie, but easier than explaining, easier than watching another face transform from friendly to pitying once they noticed her walk. "Town ain't big enough for passing through to take long," he called after her, amusement coloring his tone. She didn't turn back, focusing instead on the weathered sign of Widow Harper's boarding house. By the time she reached the porch steps, sweat beaded on her forehead and her breathing came in short bursts. The journey had been exhausting, and her leg ached fiercely. The widow herself answered Clara's knock, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her sharp eyes catalogued Clara's appearance, lingering momentarily on her leg before snapping back to her face. "Clara Bennett, I presume, the school teacher?" She didn't wait for confirmation. "Rooms ready. Meals at 6, noon and 6. No men allowed upstairs, no liquor on the premises, and rents due first of the month." Clara nodded, following the woman inside. The boarding house smelled of lye soap and pine, its narrow hallway leading to a modest parlor. "School term starts in 2 weeks, Mrs. Harper continued as they climbed the stairs, Clara gripping the banister tightly, conscious of her awkward gait. "Board of Trustees meets tomorrow evening at the church. They'll expect you there." The room was small but clean: a narrow bed with an iron frame, a washstand with a porcelain basin, a simple dresser, and a window overlooking the street. Clara set down her bag, fighting the urge to collapse onto the bed. "Thank you, Mrs. Harper." The widow lingered in the doorway. "Supper's in an hour, don't be late." She hesitated. "Your father's letter mentioned your condition. Will you be needing any special accommodations for the school?" Clara's spine stiffened. "No, I require nothing special." After Mrs. Harper left, Clara sank onto the edge of the bed, massaging her aching thigh muscle. Special accommodations. The very phrase made her stomach clench. She'd spent a lifetime refusing special treatment, pushing herself beyond pain, desperate to prove her worth despite her twisted gait. Boston society had deemed her unmarriageable, a burden, a charity case. Her parents, after years of failed introductions and dashed hopes, had finally arranged this position, sending her far enough away that their social standing wouldn't be affected by her continued spinsterhood. Clara unpacked methodically, hanging her modest dresses in the small wardrobe, placing her mother's silver-backed hairbrush on the dresser. Last came her most precious possessions: books. Shakespeare, Dickens, Austen, and several volumes of poetry. She arranged them carefully on the windowsill. At supper, she met the other boarders, two elderly sisters who worked at the millinery, and a young widow who played piano at the church. They were polite but reserved, their eyes flickering occasionally to her leg when they thought she wasn't looking. Clara ate little, exhaustion making the simple task of lifting fork to mouth seem monumental. Tomorrow would be her first real test meeting the school trustees, the men who would judge whether she was fit to teach their children despite her physical flaw. She rose early the next morning, selecting her most professional dress navy blue with a high collar and modest bustle. Her hair she twisted into a severe knot at the nape of her neck. The mirror reflected a young woman of 24, with clear gray eyes and a determined set to her jaw, someone who could perhaps be pretty if she ever smiled. The school stood at the edge of town, a simple one-room building with rows of rough-hewn desks facing a larger teacher's desk on a raised platform. Clara spent the morning there, familiarizing herself with the space, reviewing the outdated textbooks, and preparing lesson plans. By afternoon, she felt confident enough to venture into town, needing supplies from the mercantile. The same bell tinkled as she pushed open the door, and the same man from yesterday looked up from behind the counter. "Well now, seems you're sticking around after all." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, deep lines suggesting he did so often. Clara nodded curtly. "I require writing paper, ink, chalk, and whatever primers you might have for beginning readers." "School supplies," he observed. "So you're our new teacher?" "Yes." Clara kept her tone professional, her posture rigid as she leaned almost imperceptibly against the counter to relieve the weight on her bad leg. He extended a hand. "Ethan Sullivan. I supply this store and half the territory with beef from my ranch. Also serve on the school board, which means I'm your boss in a manner of speaking." Clara reluctantly shook his hand, noting the calluses that spoke of hard work, the gentle pressure of his grip. "Clara Bennett. I assume we'll be formally introduced at tonight's meeting." Ethan gathered her requested supplies, moving with an easy grace that Clara couldn't help but envy. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of Wyoming sky. His dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, too long for Boston fashion but somehow fitting here. "What brings a Boston lady to Copper Gulch?" he asked, measuring out ink into a small bottle. Clara stiffened. "How did you know I'm from Boston, your accent, and those fancy shoes weren't made for Wyoming dirt?" His gaze dropped briefly to her feet before returning to her face, no trace of judgment in his expression. "Don't worry, secret's safe with me." "There's no secret," Clara replied. "I simply wished for a change of scenery." Ethan's laugh was unexpected, a rich, warm sound that seemed to fill the small store. "Nobody comes to Copper Gulch for the scenery, Miss Bennett. They come to escape something, find something, or make something. Sometimes all three." Clara gathered her purchases, placing coins on the counter. "Perhaps I'm here to teach children. Good day, Mr. Sullivan." The trustees' meeting that evening was held in the church basement, 5 men seated around a scarred oak table, Ethan among them. Clara sat stiffly in a hard wooden chair, answering their questions about her qualifications, her teaching philosophy, her experience. The men seemed satisfied with her responses, impressed with her Boston education. Only the banker, Mr. Hollister, appeared skeptical. "Teaching requires standing for long hours," he noted, his gaze dropping pointedly to her leg. "Given your infirmity, are you certain you can manage?" The room fell uncomfortably silent. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "I assure you, Mr. Hollister, I am perfectly capable of fulfilling all duties required of me. My leg has never interfered with my abilities." Hollister opened his mouth to speak again, but Ethan cut him off. "I believe Miss Bennett's qualifications speak for themselves. Unless you'd like to ask our other applicants the same questions." He paused meaningfully. "Oh wait, there are no other applicants because nobody wants to teach in a town where the last schoolmaster left after being threatened by miners for teaching evolution." The tension broke as several men chuckled. The meeting concluded shortly after, with Clara officially welcomed as the new teacher. As she gathered her things to leave, Ethan approached. "Don't mind Hollister. He's suspicious of anyone who uses words with more than 2 syllables." Clara sighed. "It's not his suspicion of my vocabulary that concerns me, Mr. Sullivan." "Ethan," he corrected. "And I know, but he's one voice. The children need a teacher, and you're more qualified than anyone who's ever taught in this town." They walked together in the fading light, Clara struggling to maintain her usual pace on the uneven ground. When her foot caught on a rut, sending her stumbling forward, Ethan's hand shot out to steady her. The warmth of his palm against her elbow lingered even after he released her. "I don't need assistance," she said, more sharply than intended. "Never thought you did." His tone remained casual. "But out here, everybody needs a hand sometimes, no shame in it." Before Clara could respond, a woman's voice called Ethan's name. A striking blonde hurried toward them, her dress cut lower than propriety dictated, her smile dazzling. "Ethan Sullivan, you promised to escort me to the social next weekend." She stopped short when she noticed Clara, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Evening, Vivian." "This is Miss Bennett, our new schoolteacher. Miss Bennett, Vivian Moore owns the Silver Spur Saloon." Clara nodded stiffly, acutely aware of the contrast between herself and the beautiful saloon owner, one lame and plain, the other vibrant and perfect. "Charmed," Vivian said without warmth. She linked her arm through Ethan's. "Don't forget your promise, Ethan." After they departed, Clara continued alone to the boarding house, her chest tight with a familiar ache. Of course a man like Ethan Sullivan would court a woman like Vivian Moore. What had she expected? That one moment of kindness meant anything. The 2 weeks before school began passed quickly. Clara threw herself into preparations, cleaning the schoolhouse, organizing books, and creating lessons. She explored the town cautiously, learning its rhythms and residents. People were generally polite, though she noted the curious glances, the whispered comments when they thought she couldn't hear. "Poor thing, walking like that. Wonder what happened to her. At least she's educated, shame about the rest." She saw Ethan occasionally on horseback heading toward his ranch, loading supplies at the mercantile, sometimes with Vivian on his arm. He always tipped his hat and greeted her warmly, but Clara maintained a cool distance. The first day of school arrived with 30 students ranging from 6 to 16 years old. Clara stood straight at the front of the room, ignoring the dull ache in her hip as she called roll and established rules. The children stared openly at her limp when she moved around the classroom, but no one commented, at least not until recess. Clara was writing tomorrow's arithmetic problems on the blackboard when she heard laughter outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone mimicking her uneven gait. She turned to see 3 boys through the window, the oldest dragging his leg dramatically while the others howled with laughter. Her hand trembled slightly as she set down the chalk, memories of similar mockery flooding back. She stepped onto the schoolyard, surprising the boys. Thomas Miller, Jacob Hollister, and Peter Williams. Her voice was calm despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "Since you find my walk so fascinating, you'll each write an essay on physical disabilities and how they affect daily life. 5 pages due tomorrow." The boys groaned, but Clara wasn't finished. "Additionally, you'll each spend 1 full day with a disability of your own. Thomas, your right arm will be bound to your side. Jacob, you'll wear a blindfold. And Peter, your leg will be splinted straight so you cannot bend your knee." "That's not fair," Jacob protested. "Neither is mockery, Mr. Hollister. Perhaps a day in someone else's shoes will teach you compassion." Word of Clara's unusual punishment spread quickly through town. By evening, Jacob's father stormed into the boarding house, demanding to see her. "My son will not be humiliated for your personal vendetta," Hollister shouted in the parlor, his face flushed with anger. Clara held her ground. "Your son was not concerned about humiliation when he was mocking a physical condition I have no control over. The assignment stands, Mr. Hollister." "I'll take this to the school board, please do." Clara's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. I believe they hired me for my judgment in educational matters. The door opened, and Ethan Sullivan stepped in, removing his hat. Everything all right in here, Mrs. Harper? Heard some shouting from outside. The widow looked relieved. Mr. Hollister is discussing a school matter with Miss Bennett. Ethan's eyes moved between them. Something the board should hear? Hollister sputtered out an explanation, painting Clara as vindictive and unreasonable. Ethan listened, then turned to Clara. Is that accurate, Miss Bennett? Clara explained her assignment calmly, the educational reasoning behind it, the opportunity for empathy it presented. When she finished, Ethan nodded. Sounds like a valuable lesson to me, he said. In fact, I'd like to read those essays when they're done. Might learn something myself. Hollister left in a huff, but the matter was settled. The next day, 3 chastened boys completed their assignments as instructed. By the end of the week, the experience had transformed their behavior and that of their classmates. Clara found notes of appreciation from several parents thanking her for the lesson in compassion. As autumn painted the surrounding hills gold and crimson, Clara settled into a routine. She taught during the day, took meals at the boarding house, and spent evenings reading or preparing lessons. On Sundays, she attended church, sitting alone in a back pew. One crisp Saturday in October, she ventured to the creek outside town to sketch the changing foliage. Finding a comfortable spot on a fallen log, she lost herself in drawing the reflected colors in the water. You've got a good eye for detail. Clara startled, nearly dropping her sketchbook. Ethan stood a few yards away, holding the reins of a chestnut gelding. He looked different away from town, more relaxed in simple work clothes, his hat pushed back on his head. I didn't mean to startle you, he said, approaching slowly. Mind if I join you? Clara hesitated, then nodded. Ethan tethered his horse to a nearby branch and sat on the log beside her, leaving a respectable distance between them. I thought you'd be at the social tonight, Clara said, remembering Vivian's invitation weeks earlier. Ethan shrugged. Not much for dancing, prefer open spaces to crowded rooms. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the creek water ripple over stones. Why teaching? He asked finally. Clara considered the question. I've always found solace in books, in knowledge. I wanted to share that with others. And why here? You could teach anywhere with your education. She tensed, closing her sketchbook. As you said, people come to Copper Gulch to escape something. What are you escaping, Clara Bennett? His voice was gentle, without judgment. Perhaps it was the peaceful setting, or his genuine tone, or simply that she'd held the words inside for too long, but Clara found herself answering honestly. Pity. Whispers. Being the poor, damaged girl that no one would marry. She stared at the water. I was born with my leg this way. In Boston, that made me an object of charity at best, mockery at worst. My parents tried everything, doctors, specialists, even a faith healer once. Nothing helped. She took a deep breath. When I turned 23 with no prospects, they arranged this position. A place where I could be useful without reminding them of their disappointment. Ethan was quiet for so long that Clara regretted her candor. She moved to stand, but his voice stopped her. People are fools, he said simply, judging worth by how straight a person walks. The world judges what it can see. Then the world needs better eyes. Ethan reached for her sketchbook, his fingers brushing hers. May I? Clara nodded, watching as he flipped through her drawings, landscapes, children playing, a hawk in flight. You see beauty everywhere, he observed. That's a rare gift. Not everywhere, Clara said softly. Never in myself. Ethan looked at her then, his gaze so intense that she couldn't look away. That's because you're using the wrong eyes to look. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Clara couldn't name. Then Ethan cleared his throat and handed back the sketchbook. I should get back, got cattle to move before the first snow. He stood, untethering his horse. By the way, Hollister resigned from the school board last week. We need a replacement. I nominated Widow Harper, figured she'd keep us all honest. Clara smiled. A wise choice. He mounted his horse with easy grace. See you at church tomorrow, Miss Bennett. I'll be there, Mr. Sullivan. As winter descended on Copper Gulch, the days grew shorter and the nights bitterly cold. Clara found the harsh weather exacerbated the pain in her leg, making each step a challenge on icy paths. Still, she never missed a day of school, arriving early to stoke the stove before students arrived. One morning in December, a blizzard swept through overnight, leaving drifts taller than a man in some places. Clara struggled through the snow, her progress painfully slow as her bad leg repeatedly sank deep into the drifts. Halfway to the school, exhaustion overwhelmed her. She leaned against a fence post, fighting tears of frustration. The sound of approaching hooves made her straighten, brushing snow from her cloak. Ethan appeared through the swirling flakes, leading a sleigh. "Miss Bennett, what in God's name are you doing out in this?" He jumped down, hurrying to her side. "The school's closed. I sent word to Mrs. Harper. She must have missed me at breakfast. I left early." Clara's teeth chattered with cold. Ethan muttered something that sounded like a curse, then swiftly lifted Clara into his arms before she could protest. He placed her in the sleigh, wrapping a thick buffalo robe around her. "You're frozen half to death," he scolded, climbing in beside her and taking up the reins. "What were you thinking?" "That children need consistency," Clara replied through chattering teeth. "That I have responsibilities." "And what good are you to those children if you freeze to death or fall ill?" Ethan's tone was gruff, but his arm around her shoulders was gentle as he guided the horses toward town. Instead of returning to the boarding house, however, he directed the sleigh toward a large building at the edge of town that Clara recognized as the doctor's residence. "I don't need a doctor," she protested. "Humor me, doctor." Matthews confirmed that Clara had early signs of frostbite on her fingers and prescribed warm compresses and rest. Ethan waited in the outer room, pacing like an expectant father. "You'll recover fully," the doctor assured Clara, "but you need to be more careful. This climate is unforgiving to those who don't respect it." When Clara emerged, Ethan insisted on taking her back to the boarding house himself. At her door, he hesitated. "Clara, promise me you won't take such risks again." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something in his voice made her look up sharply. His expression was troubled, his eyes dark with concern. "I've spent my life proving I need no special consideration," she said quietly. "This isn't about consideration, it's about sense." His hand rose, almost touching her cheek before dropping away. "Some things are worth protecting." Before she could respond, he turned and left, his broad shoulders disappearing into the swirling snow. That evening, Clara sat by her window, watching the blizzard rage outside while contemplating Ethan's words. No man had ever looked at her the way he had today, as if she were something precious rather than pitiful. The next few weeks brought a thaw in more ways than one. Clara found herself increasingly in Ethan's company. He appeared at school to fix a broken window, delivered books he thought she might enjoy, invited her to Sunday dinner at his ranch. The ranch surprised her, not the rough cabin she'd expected, but a proper house with glass windows, polished floors, and bookshelves filled with classics and scientific journals. When she commented on this, Ethan smiled. "I may work with cattle, but that doesn't mean I don't appreciate Thoreau. A man should feed his mind as well as his body." They discovered a shared love of literature, debating favorite authors over coffee on his porch as winter slowly released its grip on the land. Ethan never mentioned her leg, never offered unwanted assistance, but somehow always positioned himself on her left side when they walked, his solid presence a buffer against uneven ground. In town, Clara noticed the curious glances, the whispered comments. Vivian Moore made her disapproval particularly clear, cornering Clara outside the Mercantile one afternoon. "He's being kind, you know," the blonde said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Ethan's always had a soft spot for strays and broken things. Don't mistake pity for interest." The words struck deep, echoing Clara's own fears. That evening, when Ethan invited her to accompany him to a spring social, she declined. "I think it best if we maintain a professional relationship, Mr. Sullivan. People talk." His eyes registered hurt before his expression closed. "Let them talk. I've never cared for gossip." "Perhaps you should," Clara said stiffly. "A man in your position should consider appearances." "My position?" Ethan's voice hardened. "And what position is that exactly? A successful rancher, a respected businessman. You have a certain standing in this community that association with. Someone like me might compromise." Ethan stepped closer, his jaw tight with anger. "Someone like you? You mean someone intelligent, brave, and more stubborn than any mule I've ever owned? Is that who I shouldn't associate with?" "You know what I mean." Clara couldn't meet his eyes. "I'm broken, Ethan. I always will be." His laugh was harsh, without humor. "Broken, is that what you think? Because you walk differently." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "For someone so smart, Clara Bennett, you can be remarkably blind." He left without another word, and Clara didn't see him for nearly 2 weeks. She threw herself into teaching, ignoring the ache in her chest that had nothing to do with her leg. When Widow Harper mentioned seeing Ethan and Vivian riding together, Clara told herself it was for the best. Spring came early that year, bringing wildflowers and thunderstorms. One particularly violent storm struck during school hours, sending children huddling under desks as lightning cracked overhead and thunder shook the building's foundation. Clara was reading aloud to distract her frightened pupils when the door burst open. Ethan stood there, rain-drenched and urgent. "Creek's flooding," he announced. "Need to get these children home before the bridge washes out." Chaos ensued as Clara organized the students by location, sending those who lived in town with older siblings, keeping those from outlying areas with her. Ethan had brought wagons and men to transport children safely home. "What about you?" he asked Clara when the last child was accounted for. "I'll return to the boarding house once I've secured the school." Ethan shook his head. "Bridge to town is already underwater. My ranch is closest. You'll have to wait out the storm there." The journey to the ranch was harrowing, the wagon wheels slipping in mud as rain pelted them mercilessly. By the time they arrived, Clara was soaked through, her legs spasming painfully from cold and stress. Ethan's housekeeper, Mrs. Flores, clucked disapprovingly at their bedraggled state, hurrying to provide towels and hot tea. She led Clara to a guest room with a steaming bath already prepared. "Senor Sullivan, he say you come maybe, I make ready." The older woman smiled kindly. "I bring dry clothes. You soak, get warm." After her bath, Clara found a simple but well-made dress laid out clearly belonging to someone taller than herself, but clean and dry. She made her way downstairs to find Ethan in the study, stoking a roaring fire. "Mrs. Flores has prepared dinner," he said without turning. "You must be hungry." "Ethan," Clara stepped closer. "Thank you for your help today." He straightened, finally looking at her. Something in his expression made her heart quicken. "I'll always help when needed, Clara." Whether you want it or not. They ate in relative silence, listening to the storm rage outside. After dinner, Ethan showed her to the library, a cozy room lined with bookshelves, a chess set positioned by the window. "You play?" he asked, gesturing to the board. Clara nodded. "My father taught me. He said it would sharpen my mind, since my body would never be my strength." Ethan's expression darkened. "Your father was wrong about many things." They settled into a game, the familiar strategies a comfortable neutral ground. Outside, the storm showed no signs of abating, rain lashing against windows as wind howled around corners. "I sold my cattle," Ethan said abruptly, capturing Clara's bishop. "Well, most of them, keeping just enough to maintain the ranch." Clara looked up in surprise. "But why?" "I thought ranching was your livelihood." "It was." Ethan leaned back, studying the board. "I'm going back east in the fall. Yale has a program in veterinary medicine I've been corresponding about for years." "You're leaving?" Clara couldn't hide her dismay, though she had no right to it. "For education, yes, not forever." His eyes met hers across the board. "I always planned to return with knowledge that could help local ranchers. The territory needs trained veterinarians." "Why are you telling me this?" Ethan's expression softened. Because I thought you should know that even seemingly settled lives can change direction, that it's never too late to follow a different path. Clara moved her queen a defensive position. Some paths are determined for us at birth, and some we choose despite obstacles. Ethan's hand covered hers on the chessboard, warm and calloused. Clara, a tremendous crash interrupted him as something struck the house. They both jumped up, hurrying to investigate. A large branch had broken through a window in the kitchen, letting in wind and rain. The next hours were spent securing the house against the storm's fury. By the time they finished boarding the broken window, both were exhausted. Mrs. Flores had long since retired to her quarters, leaving them alone in the quiet house. "You should rest," Ethan said, noticing Clara's fatigue. "Tomorrow we'll be busy assessing damage," Clara nodded, too tired to argue. As she turned toward the stairs, her bad leg buckled beneath her. Ethan caught her before she fell, his arms strong and sure around her waist. "I've got you," he murmured, his face close to hers. Clara should have pulled away, maintained the distance she'd carefully constructed. Instead, she found herself leaning into his strength, her hand resting against his chest. "Why are you so kind to me?" she whispered. Ethan's laugh was soft, incredulous. "You truly don't know." Before she could respond, his lips met hers tentatively at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. The kiss deepened, his arms tightening around her, her fingers threading through his hair. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. "I've wanted to do that since I first saw you limping down the street, too proud to ask for help," Ethan said, his forehead resting against hers. "Your strength, your determination, they humble me, Clara." She pulled back slightly, searching his face. "This isn't pity," his expression hardened. "I've never pitied you. Admired you, respected you, desired you, yes, but never pity." "But my leg, your leg is part of you," Ethan interrupted. "Like my scar from the war, like the color of your eyes, like the way you bite your lip when you're thinking, it's just one piece of who you are." Clara touched his face wonderingly. "I pushed you away because I thought you deserved better." "Better," Ethan shook his head. "Clara Bennett, there is no better, not for me." He kissed her again, more urgently this time, and Clara allowed herself to believe in his words, in his touch, in the possibility of a future she'd never dared imagine. Morning brought clearing skies and revelation. Clara woke in her guest room, momentarily disoriented before memories of the previous night flooded back: the storm, the chess game, Ethan's kiss, his declaration. They had parted reluctantly, propriety demanding separate rooms despite the intimacy they'd shared. She dressed quickly in her now dry clothes from yesterday and made her way downstairs. Ethan stood on the porch, surveying the storm damage. He turned at her approach, his smile warming her more thoroughly than the emerging sun. "Good morning," he said. "Sleep well?" Clara nodded, suddenly shy. "The storm has passed. The weather won, yes." Ethan took her hand. "Clara, I meant everything I said last night. I love you, your mind, your spirit, your determination. The way you walk has never mattered to me except—" "Except?" she prompted when he hesitated. "Except that I've noticed something. Your steps may not be even, but they're sure, purposeful." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "When I'm with you, I feel grounded, centered, as if I've found where I belong." Clara's breath caught. "What are you saying, Ethan?" He dropped to one knee, still holding her hand. "I'm saying that your crooked walk has led me home, Clara Bennett, and if you'll have me, I want to walk beside you for the rest of our days, wherever that path may lead." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks as joy expanded in her chest. "People will talk," she whispered. "They'll say you settled for less. Let them talk." Ethan rose, cupping her face in his hands. "We'll know the truth, that I'm the fortunate one to have found a woman of such courage and grace." "Yes," Clara said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you, Ethan Sullivan." Their wedding took place that summer in the small church, wildflowers decorating every surface. Clara wore her mother's veil with a dress Mrs. Flores had helped make, specially designed to accommodate her needs without sacrificing beauty. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm, he and her mother having made the journey west upon receiving news of the engagement. their initial shock giving way to genuine happiness when they witnessed Ethan's devotion. The townspeople filled the church, even Vivian Moore offering reluctant congratulations. Clara's students created a hand-drawn book of well wishes, many illustrations showing their teacher and Mr. Sullivan holding hands, always with Clara's distinctive gait lovingly depicted. As Clara and Ethan exchanged vows, she stood straight and proud, no longer hiding her difference but embracing it as part of who she was, the woman Ethan Sullivan loved completely. Their life together unfolded with unexpected richness. Ethan completed his veterinary studies, returning to establish the territory's first proper animal hospital. Clara continued teaching until their first child was born, a daughter with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. They added onto the ranch house, creating a library that became known throughout the region, hosting regular literary discussions that drew people from neighboring towns. Clara started a scholarship fund for children with physical challenges, ensuring education remained accessible to all. Sometimes at night, when their children slept and the Wyoming wind whistled around their home, Ethan would take Clara's hand and lead her to their porch. Under star-scattered skies, they would dance slowly, her uneven steps and his steady ones creating a rhythm uniquely their own. "Your steps led me home," he would whisper, holding her close, "and home is wherever we walk together."